Welcome back. So, if it is easier for y'all to just listen to them back to back to back, like if you have a commute or again, you're just doing, maybe you're like gutting your house and you want to listen to something positive while you go through room after room, right? I've actually uploaded these back to back in order on a YouTube playlist. So, if that's easier for you, I will start attaching that link into the title, if you will. All right? Or maybe you are watching this on YouTube, so you already know that. So, welcome back. Chapter 19, The Ultimate Rule of Positive Energy. Again, from The Energy Bus, written by John Gordon. As they approached George's office, Joy gave him one last piece of important advice. There's one last thing I got to tell you all about, George. You really need to know. It's so important, it's not even part of the 10 rules. It's in a class all by itself. It's like the ultimate rule of positive energy. And it's so important, I want you to write it down. George pulled out a piece of paper and a pen and waited for Joy to continue. Here it is, George. Your positive energy and vision must be greater than anyone's and everyone's negativity. Yours certainly must be greater than everyone's doubt. After all, George, there will always be people who don't share your vision. There will always be the doubters who doubt, and tell you you can't do this and you won't be able to accomplish that. They think that dreams were meant for others, but not for people like you and them. And there will even be people who don't want you to succeed because it makes them see their own weaknesses and failures. Rather than driving their own bus, they are trying to ruin everyone else's ride. So that's how important your positive energy is, George. You can always kick people off your bus, and you'll need to do that from time to time. But just remember that there will always be more negative people who get on. And sometimes you will have an energy vampire on your bus like a boss or someone who you can kick off. You got to deal with them. That's why you got to feed the positive dog and why you got to cultivate it every day and why we gave you the energy book. One day is not enough, George. It's got to be a habit. Positive energy is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. The stronger it gets, the more powerful you become. Repetition is the key, and the more you focus on positive energy, the more it becomes your natural state. So when someone comes at you with negativity, you will be able to respond with strength and positive energy. Just as you become a more skilled golfer by playing more often, you also develop the skill of positive energy by practicing. The more you do it, the more natural it becomes. So grow it and build it so you have the power to overcome the negativity. That's how it works, George. That's the key. George couldn't argue with her. His positive energy wasn't that powerful. That's why he had been so shaken by the people who hadn't gotten on his bus. He didn't have the strength and certainty, and his vision wasn't focused. He had allowed himself to be manipulated and affected by the naysayers because he was weak. He knew today would be the day that they would have to get the bus moving because it was up to him, and he had to be strong. He vowed to himself that today would be different. But before he could step off the bus, Joy grabbed his arm. Oh, and one more thing before you leave, George. Take this rock. What is it? George asked as he held out his hand. Well, I know it doesn't look like much, all black and dirty and pretty ugly, actually, but it's a special rock that was given to me by my teacher. And when he gave it to me, he said, "Find the value in this rock, and you will find a priceless treasure inside yourself and in all the people you encounter." Well, what do I do with it? George asked. Put it in your pocket for now, she said, and then look at it often and let it remind you of what I just told you. Find the value in yourself, find it in the rock, find it in your team. Chapter 20. George takes control of his bus. The first thing George did when he got to his office was call Larry in for a meeting. He wanted to meet with each energy vampire, as Joy suggested, so he could get his bus rolling first thing in the morning. He knew he needed to take action and fast. The team was waiting and they needed serious direction, focus, and positive energy today. As he sat at his desk waiting for Larry to walk in, a feeling of fear and nervous energy enveloped him. It feels like game day, he thought, as he remembered what it had felt like to have a nervous feeling in the pit of his stomach before his big lacrosse games. With the crowds cheering and the anticipation building, he remembered feeling like he was going to collapse and yet explode with excitement at the same time. He knew this feeling well, and it was good. It made him feel alive and let him know he was ready. Plus, his nervous energy had often become fuel for some of his best performances. It's game day, he thought, and for the first time in a long time, he felt alive and ready. As soon as Larry walked in, and before he could make a negative comment to George for interrupting his creative thought process, George struck hard and fast. He told Larry point blank that he had had enough of Larry's negativity, and if he didn't help move the bus forward in a positive manner, then he was off the bus, effective immediately. Larry, while in shock at George's directness, responded with willingness and agreed to George's demands for positive energy and positive contribution. George wasn't surprised. He knew Larry had a family and couldn't afford to lose his job right now. Tom, on the other hand, was a completely different case. He had no allegiances to anyone, especially to George. They had never liked each other, and they both knew it. But this isn't a matter of liking each other, George thought. It's a matter of getting things done and having the right team in place for the NRG 2000 product launch. So when Tom walked in, George was ready. "I want you on my team, Tom, but I can't have you on the team if you are going to prevent us from achieving our goals," George said. "I can't have you be a disruptive influence anymore." "Who are you kidding?" Tom responded forcefully. "The only disruptive influence is you. The problem we are having are not because of me. They're because you can't lead. Don't blame me, blame yourself. I know we don't like each other, never have. But the real problem is that I don't respect you as a leader. And I'm certainly not going to say what you want me to say so I can go on your silly little ride with you. You need me, George. The team needs me. And if you get rid of me now, then you'll be driving your bus right off a cliff. So unless you have something important to say to me, I'd like to get back to doing my job." George's shoulders slumped forward. He could feel his body getting weak, as if the energy was being sucked out of him. He was wilting like a dying plant. He didn't know what to say and was shaken from head to toe. "So, why did you hand in your bus ticket?" George asked. "I only handed my bus ticket in to you because I want the front row seat when I watch your bus implode," Tom said with a big grin on his face. "You and I both know it's going to happen, and when it does, no one will be happier than me." George put his hands passively into his pocket and felt the rock that Joy had given him. He took it out and looked at it as he tried to think of what to say next. He had never expected to be overtaken like this. "What is that?" Tom asked. "Your pet rock?" As George looked at the rock, he remembered what Joy had said about finding the value in yourself. He realized Tom didn't believe in him because George didn't believe in himself. He was allowing himself to be pounced on and verbally assaulted by a grinning, arrogant, energy vampire who had no interest in helping his team succeed, and certainly no desire to help George turn things around. And worst of all, he was taking it. Just as he had taken it in the past few years from everyone and everything. Every day life had beaten him down a little more. Each day his confidence had shrunk, and each moment he had become less of a person that he admired and more of the person he pitied. George vowed he would not be weak today. He had vowed he would be strong, yet here he was, being weak and beaten down again. "Enough," George thought to himself as he clenched the rock in his fist. "Enough," he thought as the word echoed throughout his entire body. Tom took a step back as he saw a transformation come over George. "No longer will I become a punching bag for life or anyone else for that matter," George thought as he took a step toward Tom. "You think I'm just going to sit here and let you talk to me like this?" George said. Before Tom could answer, George said, "Think again. Are you very talented? Of course you are. Could we use you for this project launch? You bet. But I'd rather have less talent and a team that is all moving in the same direction and striving for the same goals than a team with someone who has your attitude. So guess what, Tom? If the bus blows up, you won't have to worry because you won't be on it. Effective immediately. You are off the bus. I didn't want it to be this way, but what you just said to me and your attitude gives me no choice. You are fired." Tom's jaw dropped as he stood frozen in shock. Then he turned, walked out of the office without saying a word, and slammed the door shut. One energy vampire off the bus, George thought as he stood there shaking his head, still shaken from the argument. It wasn't easy, but he knew it was the right decision. Even though Tom was one of the most talented people, which is why he had put up with Tom for so long, it had to be done, and the team would be better off for it. Personally, George felt like a 200-pound weight had been lifted off his shoulders. He felt strong and free. Looking at the rock one more time before putting it into his pocket, he thought of Joy and smiled. For the first time in a long time, he was proud of himself. George's plan for the 3 wolves, including Joy's recommendation of simply isolating them from the team since they didn't want to be on the bus. But when Michael walked into his office with guns blazing, telling George that he was crazy for firing Tom and that this surely meant the bus was going up in flames and so was George, he had no other choice but to tell Michael it was this bus's way or the highway. Michael, too proud to succumb and too angry to retreat, quit and decided he would get on another bus traveling on another road. That makes 2, George thought. After the fireworks show George had experienced this morning, he wondered what else could be next. He didn't like conflict, fighting, or yelling. He certainly didn't like firing people or losing 2 members of his team. But he had vowed to stay strong and true to his vision. It was either this or failure. He was ready for battle with Jamie and Jose, but truly hoped they wouldn't have to exchange blows. When George told Jamie she was either on his bus or off it, she agreed to be on it, but then hit him. Not with negativity, but with a hard truth. I've worked for you for several years now, George, she said. And every year, every day for that matter, you seem to get grumpier and more bitter. We even had bets about when you would just implode, not show up one day and give up. But every day you keep coming in, making yourself miserable and your team miserable in the process. This team is in shambles, not because of us, but because of you. None of us could believe they kept you so long. And so when you told us you wanted us to get on your bus, I'm like, there's no way I'm getting on his bus. Why should I? When his bus had been trudging along aimlessly for the past year. But if you say I have to get on my bus to keep my job, I will. I'll get on it, but I want you to know why I didn't get on it in the first place. George sat there stunned. He knew everything she had said was true, and yet it was difficult to accept it. He didn't know what to say or how to respond. He wanted to tell her about Joy and the energy bus and what he had learned, but he was paralyzed. And besides, he didn't have time to get into it. All he did was thank her for her honesty and for being on his bus and waited for Jose, who was about to deliver another blow. When Jose walked in, George immediately said he was surprised that Jose didn't want to get on his bus after all they had done together. Jose didn't pull any punches either and came right back. That's right, George, he said. I've given you my all. I've done everything you've asked me to do. I stay late, I work weekends, I pick up everyone else's slack, and not once do you say thank you. Not once do you tell me that you appreciate my hard work and loyalty. When I asked you for a raise, you said you would think about it and never talked about it again to me. What's that all about, George? You just walk around here worrying about you and your job, and you don't really care about me. So when you all of a sudden ask me to get on your bus because you want to save your job, and don't think we don't know that if this launch fails, you are gone, because everyone knows that. I'm supposed to get all excited and whoopee, I'm on the bus? It's not happening. It's hard for me to get on your bus when you surely haven't gotten on mine, he shouted. Once again, George was hit right between the eyes. He had been taking a lot of blows lately, and this one coming from the person he liked and trusted the most was the hardest. But he knew Jose was right, and there was nothing he could say to make Jose feel better at this moment. He was fired up, and George understood why. You're right, George said. You're right. That's all I can say. Jose, who was expecting to get fired, was surprised at George's response. He had seen Michael and Tom walk out of the office earlier and thought everyone was getting fired, so he was stunned and relieved at the same time that George was acting so calm. For a few moments, George and Jose stood there in awkward silence, both not knowing what to say. Jose spoke first. Okay, now what? He asked. George stood silent, considering. Now what? As a thought popped into his head that said, you can't change the past. Let it go. Create the future. Now, we create our future, George answered confidently as his eyes lit up. He had been knocked to the canvas again with 2 right hooks, but this time he got up. He wasn't giving up this time, no. This time he was charging forward toward his vision. Now, I ask you to give me a chance to make it up to you, he said. I don't know how yet, but I'll think of something. Just please help me with the launch and let me prove to you that I'm someone you feel good about working for. Let me show you I'm here for you. Jose agreed, and they walked out of his office together to gather the team for a meeting that would be the start of a very productive and positive day.